Let's look at how the body defends itself against pathogens. We have three lines of defense: the first line of defense, the second line of defense, and the third line of defense. The first line of defense is what the pathogen encounters first, like your skin, hair, mucous membranes. Those would be like the first line of defense. You want to imagine the first line of defense as your basic security that you see in any organization, like campus security, for example, would be your first line of defense. The second line of defense is what the pathogen encounters after it's gone past the first line of defense. So this would be a little bit more sophisticated. So that might be your police force, could be your second line of defense. The third line of defense is far more specific and it's the most sophisticated kind of defense, and this is like the special forces in the army. So the first line of defense is non-specific. This means that it protects the body against all pathogens. The same goes for the second line of defense, whereas the third line of defense is highly specific. For example, antibodies produced against the COVID-19 virus would be an example of the third line of defense. Let's take a closer look at the first line of defense. The first line of defense are barriers that are already there in the body and is the first thing that the pathogen encounters. So it is difficult for the pathogen to penetrate these barriers and enter the body. So we have three types of barriers. We have physical barriers such as skin, hair, and mucous membranes. We have chemical barriers such as hydrochloric acid, lysozyme, and vaginal secretions that are acidic. And we have physiological barriers such as coughing, sneezing, vomiting, and diarrhea. So let's take a look at each one of these. The physical barriers, we start with the skin. The skin is what the pathogen first encounters, so our skin is our first barrier. The second barrier is hair. The third barrier are mucous membranes. We have four tracts in the body that point to the outside, that are open to the outside world. Those are the digestive tract, the respiratory tract, the urinary tract, and the reproductive tract. All these tracts open to the outside world, which means we are more susceptible to pathogens entering. So the mucous membranes release mucus and keep these tracts very slippery, not allowing the pathogen to penetrate the deeper tissues. The physiological barriers are obvious. Coughing, sneezing remove pathogens from our respiratory tract. Vomiting and diarrhea remove pathogens from our digestive tract. They might be unpleasant, but they are there for a reason. They benefit us by protecting us against the pathogen. Chemical barriers, we have many chemicals: HCl in the stomach, lysozyme, which is an enzyme that is found in saliva and tears and nasal secretions. They deter bacterial growth, they basically kill bacteria. Sebum, which is oil that comes along with your hair follicle, also deters bacterial growth, and vaginal secretions, which are acidic, can kill bacteria. The second line of defense is more sophisticated than the first line of defense because the immune system should actually do something to deal with the pathogens that have penetrated the first line of defense. You want to imagine the second line of defense as being a combination of the FBI and the armed forces involved in combat or rescue. We're going to classify the second line of defense into three types: protective processes, protective proteins, and protective cells. So we'll start with the protective processes. There are two types of protective processes that we will look at. One of them is inflammation, and the second is fever. both inflammation and fever are beneficial to the body unless they go out of control. The second is protective proteins. Let's look at two types of protective proteins. One of them is the interferon, which is an antiviral protein, which we will look at closely in a bit. The second is a complement protein. Complement proteins are a set of proteins floating around in the blood, waiting to be activated by the presence of a pathogen. The third group is the protective cells. We will take a look at two major protective cells at the second line of defense, and they are the natural killer cells and the phagocytes. The natural killer cell is a kind of lymphocyte, and the phagocyte is the macrophage or monocyte. The third line of defense involves two types of immunity. We have the antibody-mediated immunity and the cell-mediated immunity. The antibody-mediated immunity involves B lymphocytes, and the cell-mediated immunity involves T lymphocytes. Both of these processes are highly specific and provide long-term protection